Okay, so this is a follow-up video about canon. This is going to go into detail about one of the most important um, canon aspects in Jewish theology, which would be Deuteronomy 13, the entire chapter. Um, Before we go into that, I want to do a little bit of house cleaning. Many people have Christian scriptures. You have the classic home Bible has the quote unquote Old Testament and the quote unquote New Testament. Well, unfortunately, the Old Testament, or the Hebrew scriptures that are translated there, are from the Septuagint. During the time of Alexander the Great, the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, and the translation that was done was so awful. About 30% of what is translated is completely wrong. We can go into more detail one day, but that's the reason why you get the virgin birth. It's translated, the word in Hebrew, I believe it is in Malachi, is Alma, which means young maiden or married woman, not virgin. So you see where the problem is. You get a lot of problems where people have killed each other and burned them on stakes because of a very bad translation. So my suggestion is this is a Jewish publishing house. It's called the JPS Bible. This is my pocket edition. It's translated directly from the Hebrew directly into English, and the translation is superior. It I think this one cost me $15. I mean, it's if you're young and you can read small print, God bless you. And but this translation is way better. It's superior to any translation that you may have, including the infamous King James, which is not a good translation. Any good scholar will tell you that. And if they tell you it's a good translation, run from them. They're a false prophet. So anyway, I'm going to highlight Deuteronomy 13. I'm going to leave the text for you to read. I think I'm going to try to find it on Blue Letter Bible, which I believe is the only place online that has it directly translated from the Hebrew. But I would strongly suggest that you go get a JPS. You can get it in any bookstore, go in the Judaica section, or go into a Jewish bookstore and they'll have it. So let's go into this. So we have Deuteronomy 13, which basically talks about divining true from false prophets. It also is a great diviner of sorts to decide what is true and what is not. And I'm going to go into some examples. Um, so Deuteronomy says that a prophet, now the word in Hebrew is the same word as Elohim, which can mean messenger, teacher. You can even use the word prophet to describe the word Elohim. It's basically the derivative of Elohim, Eloha. So so you basically, it says this is how you divine it. If the prophet gives you a prophecy and it doesn't come true, then he's a false prophet, obviously. But let's say the prophet tells you a prophecy and it does come true, but then he turns around, we're assuming it's a he. He turns around and says, "Now let us follow other ways, other gods," and that translation, "other ways," which is found in the text, means to go away from the original instruction, which means to go away from Torah. So. So if any teacher says to you, performs miracles, it means that you can perform miracles, bring people back from the dead, and whatever. But if you're told that you don't need this, you don't need to obey the Torah any longer, then that person is a false prophet and should be, well, the Bible's rather the Torah is very strict. That person should be killed. My more temperate statement is that you should avoid that person, or you should avoid that belief system and walk away from it. A good example of where a prophet, a quote unquote prophet, speaks or passes has a miracle and then turns around and says you no longer need a law, is Paul in in Galatians 3. So that's why this is the reason why many Jews, all Jews, reject Christianity. Well, we can go into a whole series about what happened to Christianity, but rejects Paul and ultimately rejects Pauline Christianity. Because at any point where it says you don't need to be circumcised, don't forget also the text also says that if any of the laws are taken away or added onto, is also a sign of a false prophet. So when you remove 611 of the laws, including the kosher laws, and circumcision included, and the obedience to the Shabbos, that's pretty much a big red flag to say that this guy is not what we want to do. Now, also, to be fair, because I don't want it to be a conflict or it's hard to avoid conflict when you're dealing with canon because canon has to be used, and this is how it's used. In Judaism, and I'm going to give an example. Judaism, and this is not necessarily a false prophet, but it's a practice that's found amongst the sages in the Talmud, speaking about what we refer to as Shabbos goys. And for those of you who do not know what that is, and I will have the verse in regard to Shabbos and who should not work on the Sabbath in the info box as well. So it says in the Torah, and I'll get the verse. I'm sorry, for some strange reason I'm drawing a blank. It says that no alien. The word is ger, G-E-R, which in Yiddish means goy, which means anybody who is not part of the faith or part of the nation of Israel, or somebody who does not practice as you do. It says that no alien who comes into your house or is in your employ, in other words, you pay them, cannot work on the Sabbath. But in Orthodox Judaism, there is a section in the Talmud that says that you can get around this by prepaying somebody who is not Jewish, a Gentile, and that person will, on a Thursday, say for example, just for the sake of argument, and they will come into your home on a Saturday. You will not speak to them, and they will turn on your lights. They will turn your TV on. They will turn on your gas, and you're able to get around the Sabbath. Another section in the Talmud says that if somebody who's a proselyte or somebody who's in the midst of converting to Judaism, it says that that person, because he's still considered a Gentile, must break the Sabbath, so they make him turn on a light or light a match during the Sabbath. Both of these things are completely in contradiction to what the Scripture says, which says no one should work on the Sabbath, regardless of whether they're a proselyte or just somebody who's employed by you. So by doing that, you're committing a sin. So that should be rejected, and that is considered false teaching, something that's counter to the Torah. So I leave you with those two views, and I also encourage you to review the section in Hebrew and in English of Deuteronomy 13 and how it's applied. Until further notice, good Shabbos and Bashalom.